group or the team, just for the simple reason that none of us is an island. None of us is in a vacuum. And in order for us to truly be able to have meaningful relationships with people and be able to resolve our problems, not just within ourselves, but also in relation to how we interact with other people, it's extremely important to take a
Hello, everybody. Good evening to everybody who's joining us from India, Asia. Good morning, whoever is joining us from Americas, North America or South America. Wow, it's amazing. So while you're joining in, please do let us know in the chat box, where are you joining us from today? And how are you doing? We have our guests who is quite energized and have joined us today to be with you all. And I'll just take a moment to introduce her. But before I do that, please go ahead with our usual spiel. Tell us, where are you joining us from? I see some of our known old names. Thank you for joining us again. And anybody who's joining us new, this is the Future of Coaching webinar, which Ram hosts and brings out some great insights for all of us. And in this series, what we are doing is we are inviting the people who work in corporate and who have experienced coaching themselves, who are coaches themselves, or who use coaching as an intervention for their teams, their organization. We would love to invite you and hear from your experiences. So if you also like to participate in Future of Coaching and have a conversation with Ram, please do write to us. Either you can write to me direct, to Magda, or to support@Coacharya. And now I see, oh, I didn't know that the chat is disabled. Wait a moment. Try putting your comments in the chat box now, please. I think this should work. Okay. So while you are trying to figure out whether the chat works or not works, let me introduce you to Ram, you all know. And today we have Rohini with us. So let me introduce a little bit about Rohini, and then she can say more about herself. Rohini is the Chief Human Resource Officer with Jubilant Life Sciences. And she has amazingly long work experience working with people, with human beings throughout her life. And she is a wonderful mother of 2 lovely daughters. Quite a proud working mom. And we have worked closely together, as Rohini is also a coach. She's trained to be a coach with Coacharya. And we are happy to have her today and speak more about her personal experience and her professional experiences with coaching. Welcome, Rohini.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Komal. And I'm cognizant that long years of work experience may translate into gray hair, but my 2 girls kick my, let me say this, ass and keep it young. So it's a nice balance. That's a nice balance to have. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Ram,
Wonderful.
it's all yours. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. When I tried it on a chat, it seems to be coming up. I'm not quite sure. Maybe there's something else that is a Zoom problem. But anyway, I think people are putting it on the Q&A. Let that continue so we can keep looking at it from the Q&A box and see what happens. Yeah. Just as what Komal had said, what we would really appreciate is people who are in positions of leadership in companies and who are also interested in coaching, who are now coaches or who would like to become coaches in some way. And leadership doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be part of a company, a profit-making company. You could be in a not-for-profit company, an NGO, or you could be in a school. You could be in multiple other kinds of leadership positions where you have responsibilities for working with teams of people. And if you would like to take part in this conversation, essentially what we are really trying to discuss in this space, as today we would be doing with Rohini, is to talk about your journey in terms of how you have moved along and in what way does coaching help. And within that, specifically, now we are quite evangelical about what we call the systemic coaching. Many people misunderstand this to be something very different from individual coaching. It is not. It is not like saying, oh, it's team or group coaching, either or individual. It's not that way. It is and both. And therefore, in a systemic approach, you work with the individual as well as the group or the team, just for the simple reason that none of us is an island. None of us is in a vacuum. And in order for us to be truly be able to have meaningful relationships with people and be able to resolve our problems, not just within ourselves, but also in relation to how we interact with other people, it's extremely important to take a larger systemic approach. So, yeah, Rohini, I mean, yeah, as I go through your CV, as it were, profile on LinkedIn, pretty impressive, starting with my own alma mater several years later, much after I left, and it shows how ancient I am, and as a management trainee in Hindustan Lever. And after that, with what, PepsiCo, GE, Ricket, and Diageo, and now with Jubilant. It's an amazing journey that you have had in various positions, from Tata School of Social Sciences, one of the, probably in my opinion, one of the best institutions for human resources in India. And so today, now that you are in this space of influencing and inspiring people, as it were, tell us a little bit about our journey, and then we can go into some specifics in terms of what you might like to highlight.
Thank you for the kind words, but what I would resonate most is a student learning to listen inwards, to be able to join the dots outwards. And right from, let me say, my early 20s, when, you know, in a South Asian country like India, you either become a doctor or an engineer. And I did follow the herd. I did clear medicine. And I did take a gap year to clear medicine. And that process of taking that drill for a year told me, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure this is what you enjoy, or were you just out to prove a point, maybe to yourself? And then, so the long story short is I gave up that medicine seat, and I don't know how the idea came in my head that I wanted to study psychology and economics. And my parents thought not only was she out of her mind to give up a medical seat in India, but on top of it, she wants to study psychology. This proves it, that she's lost her mind. So they had evidence, hard evidence. And all the aunts and uncles were sent to counsel me. But I was telling Komal, who's been my guide in this coaching journey, what is an oak tree but a nut that stood its ground? So that's a bit of me, a nut. And every time I've listened to my instincts deeply, Ram, for all the scare of here and now. It's always liberated me. Every time I've listened to it, it's scary, it's not easy, it's very overwhelming, but it's eventually liberating. So for me, I guess everyone was following the coaching accreditation bandwagon, and that I did not want that to mean much really. I wanted to take the journey when I felt ready. And I was telling my colleagues that I wanted to invest in myself. So even though my organization would have paid for it, I chose to pay myself because I wanted to. It meant something else to take a pause, invest in myself, my moment of reflection, and to give it my 100%. And I really enjoyed it. And the only thing I can say, I'm left with two very powerful thoughts. We have to coach ourselves first before we can be worthy, ready in any way to coach anyone else. And what can any one of us offer as a coach? It's nothing but presence. So with those two thoughts, I am a student. I would love to continue to feel like a student. And that's the space I'm most comfortable with, because anything else is the beginning of the end, if I can say.
Yeah, absolutely, Rohini. First of all, I wish I had your guts and I was as much of a nut as you probably have been. Because for me,
it's a hazard, Ram, let me warn you. It's a hazard.
Well, it's a hazard, but not doing that is also a hazard, which I have found out in my life. For me, it was preordained. It's not just about parents, it's about the family astrologers and various other people who said I have to be an engineer, like my sister and my brother had to be doctors and so on and so forth. So it is all decided, done and dusted. And so, yeah, that's a final product turned out of that packaged arrangement in whatever way it was. And over a period of time, I realized the best thing that I could have done, and I would like to have done, was to go into psychology. Because soon after doing that, for whatever reason, I got drawn into Jung, Freud, all that kind of stuff, and spirituality and combining them and so on and so forth. So yeah, but you had the guts to do it, I didn't. And there was no intuition after that, because most of the time in my life, everything happened totally unplanned. Whatever happened was something that I never, ever truly, really major changes that happened to me, including leaving levers that after several years, when I probably was knocking on some senior leadership positions, etc., was something like this, and whatever else I did leaving the country and so on and so forth. So things work in multiple ways, unplanned ways, and so we are also coping with it. So let me, from there, go into the space which probably you might have guessed I was going into, in terms of how do you lead change in organizations as you have worked through, and what is your modus operandi, as it were, in terms of doing that?
Let me throw you a curveball, Ram. I'm going to do that. You just spoke about, and you stirred something in me as you talked about how you felt the decision about you becoming an engineer and going into a particular set of organizations was sort of served for you, or you took it without questioning it. And if you had to look at the social ecosystem in the country as an organization of sorts, structured with no rules, no formal rules, so to speak. And of course, I'm assuming you identify with masculinity, and therefore you are sort of a product of patriarchy just as much as I am a product of matriarchy, as I identify being a female. And as you were talking, what you were talking, my reflection was not that gender equality is the most difficult thing. It's so easy to have one gender bigger than, sort of dominant versus the other. And in South Asian cultures, it's the patriarchy that sort of, in a way, sort of it dominates outside the home. And matriarchs are meant to dominate inside the home. So I just wanted to sort of offer you that reflection, not that I can, but it's like showing lamp to the sun. But patriarchy is tough on men a lot more, I believe, than patriarchy stuff on women in South Asia, and not many talk about it. So my 2 cents of, if I can outreach for you there.
Actually, it's strange. Let's continue this way. This is what I meant by leading into something completely unplanned. This was not what we had talked about. This is not what I had planned. But since you have thrown the curveball, let's pick it up that way. I spent almost about 10 years of my life trying to discover my feminine self. Okay. And it was not an easy journey. It took long. And even today, possibly, there are people who would say you're not what you claim to be, but there's a lot more respect for me. Forget about outside, but for me inside, that feminine aspect of what it needs to be when we apply the traditional norms of nurturing, love, compassion, etc., rather than aggression part of it. But that's only one part of it. If you really go deep into either psychology or even our own spiritual practices, in any religion, be it all religions, major religions are Eastern anyway. There are no Western religions. Okay? The farthest east, west that it started was with Jerusalem or Middle East. Okay, nothing further than that. But even in those, the creator was always he. He was a bearded old man with a harp who created this world in 6 days and went to sleep. And look at the shape of the world as it is now. So, but whether it is the Judaic religions or the Vedic religions of Hindu Buddhism and so on, the creator was always if at all there was a creator, Buddha questioned that, was always a he. It was never a she. And then we make a big thing about in India about the fact we worship female gods and this, that, whatever it is, whether people have any respect for those other than the fact that you worship the metaphors, that's strange. And it does affect us in a lot of ways. You talked about Asia. It's not really, believe you me, how much people want to give, what do you call, face-saving kind of excuses. You work for an American company. And I've seen exactly that when I have personal conversations with people I have coached, that women go through exactly the same problems that women in Asia go through. It's no different. It's at the end of the day, it's a man's world, unfortunately, totally unfortunately, whether you call it by patriarchy, matriarchy, whatever it is. And it shouldn't be. We all understand that. So we have frameworks of DEI and so on and so forth, all that kind of a stuff. Now, the question is really, it's like, and after this, I'm going to leave it to you. Like Otto Scharmer's beautiful theory, where he talks about absencing, starting with a total refusal to recognize that this is happening, that you don't even see what you're looking at. And then, of course, at the next level, that you don't consider yourself responsible for it and you don't do anything about it. So he's talking about those 3 levels. So now that you are in a responsible position in organization as a woman, irrespective of matriarchy, patriarchy, whatever it might be. So what is it? I'm not asking it as a question for you to defend yourself, but what I'm saying is, if you look at it together, what are the things that we can genuinely do in the organization that we work for, that there's automatic respect for the other person, irrespective of whether that person is a man or a woman, young or old, that happens. Because that is the heart of coaching anyway.
Absolutely. Very powerful reflections and provocations, Ram. And how do I, again, I'm going to say this out there. The burden of the man running the house, running society, running the world is after all a burden. And the women, the non-men are not yet central to the focus of attention, lesser expectations, therefore lesser burdens, and a little effort yields a disproportionate result is also the advantage of the underdog, I would call out. And it shouldn't have to be so. And I'll move into the org realm in terms of masculine energies at workplace and feminine energies at workplace, and how the extreme of either, I think, there's only one word I can say, leads to toxic cultures. And somewhere the striving of the centrality, the balance of the two, that ever delicate balance of focus on people and focus on task. And often when you focus on people, you let them focus on the task. In a systemic way, it's cerebrally, cognitively known, beaten to death, a universal truth. But in practicality, when we look around, it's so hard to achieve. It's so hard to achieve because I think you use the term, the patterning is taken for granted and adopted sort of with no questioning, sort of with status quo, and so sort of like a given. And I do believe coaching in any setup is about figuring out why are we here and what will keep us going in the future to a better place, space, and the why of it. Why should we move as an individual? Why should we move as a collective? What's in it for us collectively? And I think today's, again, from an external point of view, the world reflections, the world problems today, be it the Ukraine war, be it the climate change, be it a pandemic, which hasn't died down, and a couple others keep popping up in different parts of the world. These are big, complex global problems. And if we try and solve them as we have conventionally solved our problems in the last 200 years with, let's say, the traditional approach, I really shudder to think if we are not going to change our approach to these problem-solving behavior, why would we expect different results? So some of the things that it's not easy, it's easy to say and done. Everyone likes a change. Everyone would like to see change. And you ask them, and would you like to see a change? What would you like to see change from this to that? And there's everyone forthcoming. And then you pivot the question saying, how are you going to drive this change? Or what are you going to change about yourself? And that's where the stony silences start coming in, because it's hard. Change is hard, self-reflection is hard. In our society, it's only now that we're beginning to talk about how vulnerability doesn't take anything away from you. If anything, it helps you sort of be more authentic in the moment and really have your troops, your team move with you in good times and in not so good times. So some of those conversations at a systemic level in a life sciences world, which has been part of essential workforce for the last 2 years, which may not have also had the best of the chances to take care of its own mental, physical health because of essential worker status. India, Canada, US, smattering of European countries, a bit of Japan, Australia. It's been tough. It's been tough, and I would just say the great resignation in different parts of the world, or great retention, great engagement, is absolutely important to enable our teams to listen to their own inner voice. I think it's the employees saying there's a disconnect, that they have a disconnect perhaps with themselves and then with the organizations around them. And I think the first thing to do is to stop and center ourselves, center themselves around what they are feeling in the moment after 2 very intense years and more. And only then sort of talk about moving forward, the why of moving forward and what's out there. And I also had, call it good fortune or just again in the midst of action. When the pandemic came down, I was in UK, in Edinburgh, in my past role. And I had the opportunity to also observe both US, how it responded to the pandemic, how UK responded to the pandemic. And of course, I would keep an eye on India, how India was responding to the pandemic. One can't say one approach was better than the other, but just to be able to compare, yes, firstly, the authenticity of the numbers in the 3 bubbles were completely different, where numbers you could rely on, where you had to take with a pinch of salt. And then where the governments were apparently capitalistic, but more socialistic, more nurturing, and quickly churning out support programs, furloughs, quick acts, support for victims of domestic abuse who were under lockdown with the perpetuators. I thought I saw a lot of nurturance from some of the governments who were actually meant to be capitalistic in their outlook. And that was very powerful for me. And of course, you could turn around from an economics point of view and say, hey, aren't those countries facing such high inflation? And was that a wise move to put so much money in their hands? And has it fueled great resignation? But then you have closer home, my country, where I thought we just left people to their means. And yes, we are a resilient country, exceptionally resilient country. But have we just lost, if I can say this, empathy for ourselves, Ram? Empathy for ourselves, just taking a pause and reflecting what this country has absorbed with such little support from anyone it has absorbed. True, today we may not be battling as bad an inflation as the rest of the world, but just look at what this country has absorbed and delivered performance numbers. Now, to me, it's a spiritual land with such a masculine, no drop ball approach to both performance and a bit of blasé approach to its own mental health. I'm like, as a system, where is this going to take us? What is it going to do to us? Is this really healthy? Is this really sustainable? And so some of those thoughts are playing out for me as I look at the life sciences business environment in India, in Canada, and US, which is my immediate business geography. I think I've said a lot. I'll take a pause and invite for your reflections as well.
Yeah. As I said earlier, we are a large number of years apart. And therefore, my viewpoint on where the world is going, it doesn't bother me. Wherever it goes, well, I mean, there's very little that you can at the end of the day do about it, except like what you said. Can you do your little bit, your might in terms of what you're doing? And you spoke of empathy. Whichever model of emotional intelligence that you look at, empathy as a social construct in terms of social relationships stems from the inner voice, the thing that you talked about earlier, the self-reflection and self-coaching. So if, as you said, we want to build empathy in terms of the relationships that we have, irrespective of, okay, whether that empathy in terms of a larger organizational sense is going to result in so much of nurturing that it leads to inflation, whatever. So it's not that other countries are not suffering from inflation. There are multiple other factors which will probably lead to that anyway. If one starts with a premise, the other aspect of what you said about vulnerability being the reflection of one's courage and confidence, and these are inner voices, and the empathy is, in a sense, the outer expression of that inner voice. So why is it so difficult for organizations to realize that even if they get people to spend a little bit of time in terms of that self-reflection or self-coaching or self-inquiry, that is going to pay huge dividends in terms of how it manifests itself as an outer voice? And the reason why I asked this is something which we are undertaking with a bit of an evangelical fervor in terms of creating what we call as a coaching mindset. And it's nothing tremendously original. It's a Carl Rogerian approach. It's what ICF now in its CC2 defines as what the coaching mindset is. Can you listen enough? Can you listen empathetically? Can you listen generatively? And can you take everybody's viewpoints together, be non-judgmental, and so on and so forth? Even if those basics are ingrained in an organization, it should make a substantial difference. But even that little bit, it's difficult to convince people. Whereas most organizations will turn and say, oh, no, I have got these half a dozen senior guys, some of them are toxic in their relationship and this, that, whatever it is. Of course it is, because you haven't even bothered to address the root cause of that in a systemic way, and you started doing it. And just by addressing 5 people or 6 people by coaching them individually, and even if they do transform themselves, does it automatically change the rest of the culture of the organization? It won't. It has to be a much larger systemic effort that has to go into it. So if throwing the ball back to you, how would you reflect on it in terms of the work that you've done, the experiences that you've had? Because you've had a variety of experiences in different kinds of companies, levers, a particular lifestyle, culture. Pepsi, of course, at the time when you probably worked, many of the guys were probably ex-Lever guys, so it was not so. But GE might have been very different. Diageo might have been very different. Now the US company is very different. So how has it played for you over these years?
Yeah, as you were talking this through, 2 thoughts flashed in my mind. One is why is it so difficult for organizations, cultures to find balance? I'm a great believer in balance. Balance is also moderation. Balance is also inclusive. Balance is also sustainable. Those are the things that sort of come to my mind. In India, I see us identifying so much with our work identities and so much with hierarchy that I see us not have not exercise the choice to give ourselves a voice. We choose not to exercise our voice. We have the voice, but we choose not to exercise our voice. And I see that in organizations, I see this in society, I see this in social media, I see this in governance. And I feel very, very pained about it. And I historically also, if my country could find its voice and stand up for itself, we can't change history, we embrace history, but going forward, we could write a different destiny for ourselves. So at some point in time, if I have juice left in me, Ram, governance is something that I want to go and impact at some point in time, but that's for a later decade. But on the same continuum, in the Western countries, is it, let me ask a tentative question, is it at the other end of the continuum, where it's a lot about, yes, life is hard, life is tough, the social systems are not as robust, social support, family, friends is more ephemeral, if I can call it. But there's also a bit of, at least at my workplace, let me say this, entitlement mindset. And I look at those disparities or skews or deviances, if I can use a strong word, from balance, center balance, is what I look at it. And I'm saying, I wish I could mix this both up and could it do both parties, either parties, a lot better. A little more grounding for the Western environment, a little less commercialization, a little more giving, a little less entitlement, and a little more speak for yourself, find your voice. You believe in yourself, and the world's your oyster. So that's one balancing thing that I notice. And then the other dimension for why workplaces, I believe, settle or don't go all the way in building a thriving, inclusive culture where vulnerability is a strength, where people can speak their mind, where you're willing to listen, all of that. And as a student at the workplace, you're right. I've seen many organizations and I've observed it, and I've tried to tear it apart in my head and then put it back. And there's only one distinction that comes to my mind, Ram. People are as intelligent in one organization from the other to the other, yeah? Yet they choose to behave differently, I think, because the orientation on the time scale is different. Short-term orientation versus long-term orientation. I want to manage my tenure in my role, in my business, in my geography, and get the heck out of here. Versus I'm here to build an institution, a legacy, to outlast my own assignment, my own stint, my own geography. And so what if the results are not there to see for my own tenure? That's the only big difference. Time and time again, I have seen, because yeah, you just want those short-term skewed results because for whatever reason, they matter to you a lot more than institutions that will outlast your tenure. So that's my take at it. And let me say this, I've also been part of some toxic work cultures, interestingly. And it's like after having a good marriage, running into a bad boyfriend. So that also happens in life. And you learn a lot, and you learn a lot, and it teaches you to really value cultures that are open-minded, that are listening, that are including, and mind you, those are not cultures that are going to cut you any slack on your performance. They're tough on performance, but nurturing on you. I have been in such beautiful work cultures, so tough on performance, but so gentle on people, that it just still gives a goosebump, to me, even as I'm talking about them. And that's my fortune. That's my absolute, that's my blessing in life.
Okay. So with those reflections that you talked about, the balance, the inner voice, and how the long and short term orientation, which is a very, very significant factor in many cultural models like Hofstad's and so on and so forth. Now that you yourself are in the coaching journey to become a coach, and I'm sure you experience coaching in different organizations at different points in time. So what are a few things that you believe that either you have already initiated, because when we spoke about the session earlier, you many of the things that you said pretty much clearly reflected that you're already practicing a systemic approach in whatever you are doing today. So for the benefit of the audience out here as coaches, so with all your organizational experiences, what are the kind of things that you would suggest that either what you're doing or otherwise you would like to do in terms of making culture more nurturing, less toxic, more effective?
Firstly, a couple of things, and I may meander, so I'm just going to sort of take it as those thoughts come. Firstly, let's all remember each one of us is a product of our contexts and our upbringing. And that's a kind of indoctrination. Each one of us is indoctrinated without us even realizing it. And indoctrination can come with its own biases. And we may think we are bias-free, but we can't self-certify ourselves on that. So I would say be very, very open to examining your own moorings, question your own beliefs, look inward, and question yourself. Question every belief of yourself. And you and I briefly touched upon in the early part of the conversation, and it takes courage on your part to say that you have taken a long time to embrace your femininity. Well, I'm corporate scarred, Ram, by everyone around me saying, you're too masculine. Rohini, you're too masculine. And I've learned to take that with a pinch of salt, saying, interesting, I look at myself as a person. You look at me as a man or a woman, masculine or a feminine. So there's a slot perhaps in your mind, which I am not fitting into. Now, what are we going to do about that? And sometimes I've been able to share, and most times I've not been able to share, but I know I'm a nut that stood its ground. So back again, just be ready to examine one's own biases, because the coaching journey really, I mean it. We can, when we light from within, can we show any kind of light to others in capacity of a coach? If there's darkness within us, how can we light anyone else's path? And then I say this, a coach may not be a complete coach or a perfect person or a role model, will have his or her failings, will have huge gaps, huge experiences. But the courage in that is, with all your failings and your vulnerabilities, you're happy to suspend your own belief, show yourself it up for another person, to help another person, saying, I have these gaps, but I'm here to be a sounding board. I have a little light to share, to light up your path, if you want to dip into that. So for me, it's about looking within, and as you untangle yourself within, there's so much abundance that creeps in, gratitude that creeps in, manifestations that creep in, or I'm not like, I would like to quote this couplet in Urdu, and I know there's an international audience who may not understand this, but it goes to the effect कि मैं तो अकेले जा रहा था, but पीछे पीछे लोग आते गए और कारवां बनता चला गया, which roughly translates, all I did was follow my inner voice. I kept taking a step at a time. And then one fine day when I looked at the back, there was an entire entourage of people following me. And that's the power of that, is only that I heard my voice and I followed my voice and I embraced the uncertainty, the vulnerability that came with it. And that's no mean feat. That's no mean feat. So the bias within, the light within, and then finally, it would be arrogant to believe we can improve, change anyone else's life. So my belief is, as a coach, we can only offer presence 100% at that point in time. There's no other gift we can offer, honestly. So I don't know if that helps, just to summarize: bias, inner work, sort of be in touch with your biases, do that inner work, and offer presence. Those are the three things that seem to work for me, Ram.
Yeah, I'll try and follow your Urdu quote with this famous couplet from, not couplet, it's a full song actually, from Kabir, Ud Jayega Hansa Kela, where he ends at the end of the day, for those, like you said, it's about the swan that is flying alone and not knowing where it's going, but it's just going. The journey is about going. And he ends saying, the guru has his own path and the disciple has his own path. There may be a guru-disciple relationship. In some ways, I'm trying to link that with whatever you said as well. What comes to me as I listen to you is you are tremendously self-reflective. So that comes easy to you, this reflection, whatever the reflections that are coming into you. Now, when you earlier talked about the short-term versus long-term, at least in my experience, I have seen far too often that it's like people are running on the spot and not moving anywhere. And they don't have the time to reflect. They don't have the time to understand what they are doing. So starting from this premise that you actually started with that right in the beginning, self-coaching. I completely 100% agree with you that at the heart of all coaching is self-coaching. If you're not able to self-coach yourself, inquire into yourself, discover yourself, you cannot heal yourself. And that's a first starting point. There was a point in my life, I wouldn't say I was about to say career, but life journey. I became a spiritual healer. And the process of that spiritual healing was to heal myself. So one of the requirements was that if you think of all the people that have done you harm and you find that you are affected by it, can you now look back into yourself? Can you forgive those people? And if they come to you for healing, would you heal them? It was an extraordinarily tough exercise. And it's like, oh my God, why the hell would I want to forgive this guy? And having gone through it later, much later in my coaching journey, I came across the whole concept of Ho'oponopono, which is the Hawaiian technique, which we've written about in our blogs. How do you take on the responsibility for someone not doing well upon yourself and say, hey, I am at fault. Can I forgive myself? Can I ask the other person to forgive me? And can I love and move forward? So in a sense, I'm trying to expand what you said into that space. Now, it may seem moronic to sort of say, hey, you can do it in an organization, but I'm 100% convinced we can do it in an organization. Question is, how do we start? Can we start with a simple exercise of telling people, can you spend a few minutes every day reflecting on what you're doing? So finally, your thoughts on, if you were to leave in every company today, what are the few things that they can start doing so that this space that you are talking about, this balance, this inner voice, non-toxic culture, all that kind of a stuff can automatically happen, and it becomes, like you earlier used, somebody used the word tough love. That's really what you were saying, that the organization on seemingly is tough, but it's tremendously nurturing. That's what tough love is about. That's what it should be about in every culture. What would you do?
So again, thank you for sharing your journey as a self-healer and how hard it was for you to forgive people you believe who had not done right unto you. And sorry, I'm going to sort of go in that space and then quickly coming into how can we help organizations move into a more nurturing space. There was a documentary one I ended up watching on Auschwitz survivor, the lady, and some horrific experiments on her family, her children, and absolutely horrific experiences. I mean, she went in with an entire family, and when she came out, she had literally nothing left on her. And she had to begin her life again, and she did marry, and she lost all her children, her husband, her sisters, her mother, father, everyone, and she had to start life again. And that documentary was about how long it took her, but then how glad is she that finally she was able to forgive the Secret Service, the Auschwitz camp inmates, the people who had perpetuated the most horrific crimes, which even keep her awake and make her break out in cold sweat, even in ripe old age of 80, 85, 90, whatever be it. And I think it's a very powerful lesson I picked up from there, Ram, and it stayed with me. You forgive others for yourself, for your own liberation, because you're a victim, not the other person. And to be able to liberate yourself, to be able to move forward, you just have to forgive the other person, because otherwise, as they also say, what is anger? It's like a poison you administer to yourself in the hope that you're hurting the other person. So what's the point of anger? So that reflection sort of came to me as you were sharing about your journey as a life healer. Moving on, I have a very interesting take, I think unconventional take on why do organizations struggle and what can be done about moving away from toxic work cultures. As an HR person, of course, it's very hard for me to backfill roles with great resignation, and it's very hard, very difficult. But you know what? Silently, I'm happy. As a human being, as an employee, I'm happy because this balance was long time coming. It's just a balancing, because let's be honest, workplaces were refusing to listen in. Maybe they were hearing, but they were not listening in. And this balancing act, power to it, kudos to it. And if there are some organizations who still choose not to listen in, well, they'll be done in. If you don't move, you'll be dragged along. And it's a matter of time, whether the millennials move us or the service industry moves us or the great resignation moves us or low population rates moves us, it's going to happen to you. And silently, secretly, I'm also happy that even in a country like India, which is populous, where the balance of employer and employees is not quite like the Western countries are seen, but it's very good to see that correction coming. But I'm also an eternal optimist, Ram, and if we look at history, you can be scared of dinosaurs in the short run, but dinosaurs will go extinct sooner than humans did go extinct. And that's what history teaches us. So that's my little take on, the toxic work cultures. How to build nurturing work cultures. There's just 2 or 3 things I have learned from my mentors, my role models around that. You have to just listen into people without the worry that if you listen in, you have to always agree with their point of view. Empathetic listening doesn't mean acquiescing in, doesn't mean you can't disagree, doesn't mean you can't have a different point of view, doesn't mean you can't have an adult discussion and a third point of view emerging. Now, I understand everyone is not comfortable with that undercurrent of conflict. Not everyone likes to go into those spaces. And that is a skill that takes a bit of honing, and most would like to be in aseptic environments, whereas life, even at workplace, can often be messy. But my invitation would be, you'll be a happier employee and a happier, more fulfilled person. Your image at the workplace, if it can resonate as much as your image of yourself, the closer the two are, the lesser the dissonance, the lesser the constant paddling you feel inside, the constant effort you feel inside. So do yourself a favor, speak your mind at the workplace. The clarification that happens, whether you're the right person for that kind of a work culture, it's a gift. Don't hide from that gift. If you receive that gift with an open mind, it'll take you to the right places and it'll unlock the right potential for you. So don't be worried, because that gift could be disruptive in the short term. So that is what I would say at an organizational level, that it'll be done to organizations versus at an individual level. Because somewhere, if we don't challenge ourselves, then sooner or later, the tide of time challenges us. So would you not rather challenge yourself in a controlled fashion much earlier than the tide of time challenges you? And that's a question back both to organizations and to individuals. And I'd leave it at that.
Yeah, the good news actually is, Rohini, recently we had a kind of a business roundtable with a couple of our senior coaches, with the CXOs and CHROs of about 8-9 companies in Bangalore. And I was quite thrilled actually that some of the things that you were talking about, that finally, and these guys the people who were heading HR and other major business functions, they were quite happy that finally employees have found their voice. Like you said earlier, you started saying that in India, people don't find their voice, but actually people are finding their voice. They are, in a sense, doing it with their feet, as it were. They thank you very much, whether it's work from home or whether it's a great resignation or whatever else it is. And what really made me feel good was these people were taking it in a very, very good way. The responses from the senior people was that, yes, it's about time. And now it's time for us to actually, we are also part of that milieu. And so what is it that we can do towards making the situation better? Or how do we take multiple stakeholder views into consideration, take a larger view, listen in, many other things that you've talked about. So I'm hoping that this trend will continue and we'll have more such conversations in this forum. Today, I have truly enjoyed myself. It started, or it went very differently from what the two of us talked about. It really had nothing to do with what we said, yeah, in terms of structurally, this is how we would go about it, but it was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for helping all of us find our voices and reflect upon our inner voice as well. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ram. Thank you, Komal. And thank you, everyone who sort of joined us in this discussion. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.